And I will have to ask you to be brief, and I'm sorry. I wish we had more and more time, but we just don't have it. So
I wrote it down so I would be.
Okay.
I'm the Reverend Alexis Chase, the Executive Director of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. Georgia IPL is a statewide nonprofit that engages communities of faith in stewardship of God's creation. In our 10 years of existence, we have helped over 1,000 communities of faith embrace stewardship and sustainability as a direct reflection of our calling as people of faith to care for what God has created. In the past 5 years, we've helped almost 50 congregations assess their capacity for installing solar energy, and the overwhelming majority of those congregations have an excellent capacity for installing solar on their facilities. The problem is that of the 50, we've only been able to help 3 congregations install solar because they have been unable to afford the upfront costs. For example, we have been working with Peachtree Road United Methodist Church to assess their facilities for solar, and they have a great capacity and a great desire to install solar. What they lack is the absolute upfront cost to afford the array. This bill would help make solar more affordable, and it would specifically help all of these congregations afford solar, including Peachtree Road. And we know from these studies that many churches can save money on their power bills now if HB 874 is passed. Last year, we did submit 11 congregations into Georgia Power's ASI program, and only 2 were chosen. The rest were left out of the program. This bill would help those congregations left out of the ASI program embrace solar energy right now. Georgia IPL fully endorses this bill and highly encourages all of you to support it as well. It would help congregations across Georgia install solar because this bill would help them finance those projects. It would lower their power bills and help them use God's original energy source, the sun. What has been out of reach for far too long for Georgia faith communities, this bill would help make a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming. I don't see any questions. Thank you very much. James Marlowe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
And I forgot to mention which lady did, but if you'll identify yourself and who you represent. If you'll identify yourself, which I already did, but if you'll identify yourself and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be here with you. My name is James Marlowe. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Radiant Solar. We are a solar installation company. We're a team of 20 individuals that work diligently to install solar panels on utility scale plants, commercial plants, and residential nonprofits. We've completed over 138 projects. We've worked with 40 different utilities. We enjoy working with utilities. We've been blessed in the state with some very well-run utilities, and we have a good experience working with them. This is a very good bill. It is a pro-business, free market bill. It's simple, and it does not go into areas of other energy policy. It's very specific around how you finance and how you purchase this. So just like in our office, we lease a copier. So we didn't have to buy a big expensive copier. We chose leasing as a way of getting that copier, and it's made us more productive. The same thing can happen for churches, nonprofits, schools, and others by using either financing, leasing, or power purchase agreements in order to get solar. So by removing the upfront cost, you're going to see more jobs created in Georgia. You're going to see more safe, reliable, affordable solar energy plants built across Georgia. It is a new day for solar in Georgia. Just last week, we participated in a ribbon cutting at a large utility plant down in South Georgia, which we basically took 110 acres of solar. We put 67,600 solar panels on it. We interconnected to Georgia Power. We did that, with a safe equipment. We did it with a technology that works very reliably. Solar panels don't have any moving parts, so they tend to work very reliably and have minimal maintenance. So in conclusion, as a business in Georgia that wants to grow, and I know many of you are pro-business, free market people, I urge you to consider this bill, and I urge you to pass it for the benefit of the solar community in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. I appreciate it. Next, we have Dave, B-E-L-O-T-E is what it's spelled.
That's me, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Dave Belote. I'm a retired Air Force colonel who was asked up here by the Georgia Property Rights Council to speak on behalf of this bill. Retired F-16 pilot who had the great good fortune in my final job, 2008 to 2010, to be the commander of Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. So on behalf of the taxpayer, I inherited and oversaw a 14-megawatt solar array, which at the time was the largest photovoltaic array on the continent, provided about 30% of the base's power, and it was financed completely by third-party financing. The United States government put in about $150,000 total of NEPA-related and permitting kind of studies, and that 14-megawatt project back then cost about $103 million. Probably build the same size project now for something on the order of $30 to $35 million because the costs have come down so far. After leaving Nellis, I retired and was very impressed by the entrepreneurial drive, the people that I had met in the renewable energy industry, but I found I couldn't escape. I was pulled back into the Pentagon as a senior civilian, and I created an office called the DoD Siting Clearinghouse to determine how close you could put solar panels, wind turbines, concentrating towers to military facilities. And then for the last 2 years, I've actually been developing wind and solar projects with an eye towards putting them on military bases. Georgia Property Rights Council called me, said, "We understand you understand how this might work." I thought it was a beautiful piece of legislation because as a retired fighter pilot, I actually understood what I was reading. Very clear about just creating opportunities from an old base commander standpoint to attract private capital and private sector innovation to solve the renewable energy and on-base generation problems. I had that 14-megawatt solar array at Nellis, but what I really cared about was the ground control stations at Creech Air Force Base that flew 65 combat air patrols of Predators and Reapers over Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia, just about 50 miles northwest of Las Vegas. And if the power to those went down, support to soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in theater stopped. I would implore you to pass this bill because I think it opens up avenues to solve that energy surety problem. I don't think it would undermine the very important relationship with the local electricity provider because where you might have Georgia Power doing a huge project on one military base, this would free up a 2 or 3 megawatt smart grid to keep one specific facility going. Sir, in the interest of time, I'll stop there. If there are any questions, I can.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Very welcome, sir. Thank you for your time.
Bobby Baker, former PSC Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the invitation from Representative Dudgeon to address you. I'm appearing here in my capacity as a member of the Board of Directors of the Georgia Property Rights Council, which is a 501c4 organization created to educate the public and policymakers regarding the benefits of secure, affordable, and reliable solar energy. The Property Rights Council is committed to eliminating regulatory and legal barriers to individual consumers and businesses being allowed to use their own resources to develop solar energy projects in Georgia. And the Solar Power Free Market Financing and Property Rights Act of 2014 does just exactly that. HB 874 does not create any subsidies or tax credits, but merely allows Georgia families and businesses to invest their own money in solar generation projects. The legislation also allows consumers to take advantage of competitive financing arrangements such as third-party financing or leasing, which, as Representative Dudgeon pointed out, is available now in over 22 states. It makes no sense to distinguish between a consumer paying cash up front for a solar panel and have it installed on their home or business, which is permissible in Georgia, but to have questions lingering regarding whether the consumer may lease or enter into a purchase power arrangement for the same solar panel. HB 874 will allow more consumers to consider the option of installing solar generation because they can now finance their investment. It would be the same thing as saying you can't lease a car, but the only way you could buy a car would be to pay for cash up front. Georgia's military bases, as the Colonel pointed out, would greatly benefit from the use of third-party purchase power contracts for the procurement of renewable energy resources, but they can't in Georgia. Military bases are under a federal mandate to procure a set percentage of their power from renewable sources. The use of third-party purchase power contracts provides them a lease
cost financing option that will make them more competitive and less likely to be targeted for BRAC reductions. During the 18 years I served on the Georgia Public Service Commission, I supported and worked for competition in utility industries because I knew that competition empowered Georgia consumers by giving them more choices for utility services. Competition lowered prices and helped stimulate innovation in the utility industries. HB 874 gives Georgia electric consumers a new option for electric power at a lower initial investment cost. HB 874 does not make you subsidize my solar panel, and I don't have to subsidize your solar panel. It updates Georgia law to reflect the evolving technological innovations that now make it possible for individual consumers and businesses to invest their own money in efficient solar generation technology. This legislation eliminates antiquated and inefficient anti-competitive legal barriers to allow Georgians to make their own decision whether they want to invest their money in solar technology. It is time to move forward and let consumers get the benefits of new technologies that are clean, reliable, and efficient. I hope you will consider supporting HB 874, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those questions.
There is a question, looks like. Okay, yes. Representative Smith.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for taking the time to invest in this worthwhile endeavor. As you know, we're all very, very sensitive to diversification of energy utilization here in the state of Georgia. I've got to ask this question, though. Coming from Augusta, Georgia, as you know, we've had a magnanimous ice storm that hit the state last week. With the inclusion of solar energy in the system that we have now, how would many of the residences have been impacted in a positive way as opposed to going through the traditional way that we have now?
Well, I'm sorry for the difficulties you went through, and the utilities responded by restoring service. But the thing that I think solar would have brought, the benefit that solar would have brought, a lot of your constituents and fellow citizens out there were completely without power. I believe that's the case. If they had a solar panel, you know, one or two solar panels on their home or their business, they would have had emergency backup power. They could have kept a light on. They could have maybe recharged their phones. They would have had basic power, you know, a limited amount of power for their services that without that solar panel, they don't have. So solar panels, solar energy is not going to be a replacement for current utilities. It's going to help consumers cut their utility bills a little bit by saving some on the peak times, cutting back. It's going to provide emergency backup power when you have major outages or outages of electric power, so that you're, you know, at home, even when you don't have an ice storm, if the power goes out, at least your you know, your alarm system will stay on. You'll have basic you know, lighting for emergency lighting, that kind of thing. So solar technology has really come a long way, and it's providing a lot of benefits now to consumers that is much more affordable than it was a few years ago. And the great thing about solar technology, it keeps getting more efficient and more cost effective.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next we have Keith Hatcher.
Mr. Chairman, Keith Hatcher with the Georgia Association of Realtors. I'll be exceedingly brief. I really just wanted to say thank you to you for your leadership and guidance, and I want to thank Representative Dudgeon for his generosity in sitting down and working through some concerns we had with the original piece of legislation. We felt like it might have infringed on property rights, and the representative made it very clear that was not his intent and worked hard with us to come up with language that was satisfactory. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. John DeAndrea.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm John DeAndre from Georgia Power. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak today, and I want to thank Representative Dudgeon as well for his openness and willingness to sit down and share with us his intent of the bill and allowing us to hopefully come to the table and be part of the solution. Georgia Power is supportive of solar energy. We're implementing a strategy that diversifies our generation portfolio that includes solar, wind, biomass, nuclear, where they're cost-effective generation alternatives for our customers, and I think that's what you've got to consider. Without the legislative mandate or change in the law, Georgia has one of the fastest-growing solar markets in the nation and stands to benefit from an estimated $1.7 billion worth of investment in this state in solar energy. Georgia's current regulatory and legal structure has served Georgia customers well, stimulating cost-effective solar development and protecting the state's history of reliable power at rates below the national average. Current Georgia law does not prevent solar development by anyone, whether an individual or a large-scale developer. We at Georgia Power fully support cost-effective generation for the state, regardless of what it might be. In partnership with the Georgia Public Service Commission, many of you may know, we've entered into an advanced solar initiative, a solar prime initiative, and a large-scale, utility-scale solar initiative that is in the process of being developed or has been developed and is being implemented. And we anticipate more than 500 new solar projects will be brought online in the state of Georgia from 2014 through 2016. Through our partnership with the Public Service Commission, all of our solar resources that I just mentioned that are going into the state have been procured from the market through a competitive bidding process or a contracted price design that prevents upward pressure on customers' rates, which I know you all are concerned with. By 2017, Georgia Power will have contracted for nearly 800 megawatts of solar, resulting in the largest voluntary solar portfolio of any investor-owned utility in the nation, and one of the largest portfolios in the nation. In conclusion, I'd just like to say again, Georgia Power is not against solar. We're interested in pushing the technology, moving the technology forward when it's cost effective and makes sense for our customers. We support any measures that aids in the expansion and delivers the principles of consumer protection, price competition, a reliable and stable grid, and safety for our customers and our employees working to deliver power to those customers. We believe, based on the preliminary review of the bill and discussions with Representative Dudgeon, that this legislation can be tailored to help continue the significant consumer-protecting solar expansion in the state of Georgia. We look forward to continued dialogue with the author of the bill and other elected officials to hopefully come to a bill that we all can be happy with. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to try to field any questions.
Looks like you did such a great job. There are no questions. Thank you.
Outstanding.
Appreciate it. Heather Tilley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Heather Tilley, and I'm the Vice President of Government Relations for Georgia EMC. Georgia EMC is the trade association that represents 41 electric cooperatives in Georgia that are not-for-profit and member-owned. We serve electricity to about 73% of the landmass of our state and about 4.5 million Georgians. Georgia EMC has had the pleasure of working with Representative Dudgeon on many issues, most recently House Bill 874. We really appreciate his transparency, his accessibility, and the tenor of our discussions on this bill so far. We most appreciate his intent to get this bill right and not get this bill done quickly and too fast. We admire the bill sponsor's goal to increase accessibility to solar power through the solar technology for those who can't afford the upfront cost of adding solar to their homes and businesses by offering alternative financing arrangements. But the bottom line is, for Georgia EMC and Oglethorpe Power, we believe that the bill's current language could have unintended consequences on the Territorial Service Act that this legislature passed in 1973. We have discussed that with the bill sponsor, and we've also told him that we'd like to work with him over the next few months to try to achieve an outcome that is something that all the parties can agree to. It's important to emphasize that EMCs are not anti-solar. The simple truth is that since electric energy cannot be stored on any large scale, the ability to meet consumer demand instantaneously is driving the force behind the fuel choices that all public utilities make. This is because public utilities are required by statute to serve on a non-discriminatory basis to every customer in their service territory, no matter where they live, how remote, how much power they use, or when they choose to use it. In addition, following the blackout in 2003, federal law mandates a reliability standard or a performance standard on all public electric utilities. These state and federal statutory mandates require that utilities have infrastructure that's generation, transmission, and distribution infrastructure in place constantly in place to constantly and instantaneously follow the electrical load as it fluctuates throughout the day. Regardless of those mandates, our society expects and deserves and is dependent on our public utilities to keep the power flowing. And there are consequences for any public utility that chooses not to do so, or that fails to do so. EMCs are committed to the continued development of renewable resources, and we've shown that leadership in that regard by forming the state's first renewable energy offering to consumers back in 2001. It's called Green Power EMC. In fact, Green Power EMC has the state's largest solar education program called SunPower for Schools. SunPower for Schools has a grid-tied solar array at 36 middle and high schools across the state that provides important solar technology education to students, faculty, and those students' families. We look forward to working with Representative Dudgeon over the next several months, and we believe this is a very critical issue we'd like to work with him closely on. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bob Middleton. And our time is just about up, Mr. Middleton. So
thank you. I'll be brief. My name is Bob Middleton. I'm here on behalf of MEAG Power, Municipal Electric Authority. MEAG was formed in '75 to provide the wholesale electric supply to the cities that contract with MEAG. There are 49 cities that MEAG serves, and they serve 750,000 Georgians. We agree with Georgia Power that the current system has operated well, and Georgia's benefited from low-cost electric rates compared to other areas. When customers from our member cities want to buy solar, MEAG goes out and purchases that solar for them. When large-scale solar projects become cost competitive with our current generation fleet, we will bring them into our fleet. In the meantime, we don't oppose customers putting in their own solar generation for their own use on their own property or selling that back to the utilities. We look forward to working with the committee as this goes forward.
thank you. I see no questions. That's all the names on the sign-up list. We have time maybe for one more person if there's anybody that wants to. Yes, ma'am. If you come up, identify yourself and who you represent.
Debbie Dooley, Atlanta Tea Party, Green Tea Coalition. I just want to thank you guys. I know this is off the subject, but I want to brag on you guys. I was very proud being in the House chamber when you passed HB 794.
We're not here to discuss any other legislation. We're not here to be praised, okay? We're here to discuss this particular bill.
Okay. This is from the Capitol Coalition of Conservative Leaders, the Green Tea Coalition, the Atlanta Tea Party, and Georgia Conservatives in Action, and the Georgia Republican Assembly. We wish to acknowledge that we accept a seat at the table regarding solar bills HB 874 and HB 657. The issue of solar energy is very important to us because it will affect all Georgia families. We feel it is our responsibility to ensure the outcomes create free market choices and the best interests of ratepayers and property owners across Georgia. And we look forward to working with Representative Dudgeon on this bill. I reached out to Representative Martin in the hallway. I look forward to his input and your input on the bill. And, you know, from our perspective, let's give the consumer real choice and many options if they want to install solar, not just one. Give them a big package, put a lot of eggs in the package. I appreciate you allowing me to speak.
Thank you. We always like to be praised, but maybe this isn't the correct forum for it, so thank you. All right. Thank you all. Here's what we're going to do. It's getting late in this. Well, it actually is getting late in the session, but it's definitely getting late as far as the 30 days. I think. Let me ask you, Representative Dudgeon, how would you like to proceed with this bill? It's your bill. How do you see yourself proceeding with it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. What I would like to do is, as some of the members of the committee pointed out, is we don't even have exact final language today. I'd like to work in the off session with all the parties involved. If the chair would like to appoint a committee to help look at that, but individually, for sure, I want to bring all the parties to the table, look at the language, and my goal would be we come to an agreement, one that everyone can be happy with, and we come back in 2015, God willing that I'm back here in 2015, and bring a bill that we can all be happy with.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate the presentation, all the work you've done. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to ask Chairman Geisinger. I haven't talked to him about this, but I'm going to ask him to do this. I'm going to ask him to chair a special subcommittee that will take this bill and work on it the rest of this session, and if nothing happens with it, which I don't think it will by the end of the session, to work with it in the interim, and to have to be a new bill number next year, but bring it back next year. And if you would do that, and you and I can get together and assign the committee members. With that, if there are no questions, no objection, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.